Let's just go. We want to make sure that. They have time.
But that's obvious. Yes, so how's your?
Yeah.
I know. So
That's good.
Very much. Okay, did you?
Like an hour.
Or not?
We just met.
You just met, okay. So she knows it's
Yeah.
I'm on. Connected, are you doing Farjana stuff?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so like stealing her and. Oh, she's in Australia.
Right.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So we are together.
You want to get your.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I. Are you still, oh, no, we were. I'm trying to think when we were talking to God. Not a copy of that. I know. We have many. Oh, you do have one.
Thank you. As I was saying, Aaron was saying, training session that I made.
Yes. Yeah, or many service, as it is about government, yeah, so our, particularly our.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ongoing, chocolate with,
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah. Then we have other. Yeah. So I want you to meet my.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So they, they're part of, yeah, next to me, but I'm hoping that after we preliminary, people take control and start doing it in different cities. So maybe I can be able to do it. So you'll see, after we present, you can decide. So icddr is, I think that with the cholera, the original. Yeah. So we did the cholera laboratory. So my father, 60 years. My father worked in that cholera lab before I was born. When it was. Yeah, and then they got it back to me. Yeah, so he went to work on the cholera and cholera. So I always have something like I want to walk. That's right. Okay. Yeah, good idea. Is that yours?
Yes.
Oh, I would try not to take it. Anyway, so I'm a soft spot. What have you been doing? Huh? Oh, okay, which one? The one on Fragile. No. Oh, yeah, it was very crowded.
Yes.
I went in, but it was like I was in the door like that. Did you stay for the breakout one? No, okay, yeah. Is this like? We hope so. So we're. In one day, one side.
Yeah. It's always better to ask for.
Forgiveness than permission. Sorry. Yes. So they also have, and no, I don't know if you were on the email and, but a very. Yeah.
I can only recommend a couple of weeks ago.
Is there anything about your post?
No, I learned how.
Anything about read Do you want to talk through any of this before you your day or you currently do you understand where you feel explaining through Sorry. We got precision health.
Oh,
And you're coming up.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably why you. No, but I want another point. Okay. These are other measures recently. Here.
It's your moderator.
Or my. Is there anything? Traveling. If there's anything in advance.
We'll track them down.
Where, this is,
Thank you.
Thursday,
oh, that's good.
we stayed the poster session on Tuesday.
It's around the same culture.
No, they do different ones each day. It's always during the.
People are happier.
Earlier in the day, I've been like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You have it already.
But I don't think, yeah, but if there's no Thursday. Yeah, so Thursday morning. we need to do that.
Yeah, but I think they're doing this.
Oh, they're doing it, that's right, she doesn't have it anymore. I did see the video, but they turned it in and then I think they'll put it up. Yeah. You're all ready.
It's okay, like, we have a law,
Yeah.
that's not my city yet. But.
Or you session.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to meet you. Great question.
That's like the superpower, right? It's-
Yeah.
When I realized that you can say you don't know.
Yeah.
So every day,
Yeah.
I mean, life is so much easier.
I'll leave the considered for the Philippines.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
I don't think.
That's okay. It's not when you're doing your.
Just cheering yours.
Yeah.
Are we over the radio today? Are you presenting? Anybody here?
Yes, I am, and
You are?
you're presenting? Yeah, because the other person just left. There's two of us doing one together.
Okay,
But
so,
there should be four. But I only see-
yeah,
Okay.
let's load the,
I think they're loaded.
Are there? Yeah.
We just had someone, oh, careful, careful. Yeah, go the other way.
yeah. The track for
Yeah, I think
newcomers.
they're all, wait, is this where they are?
You are, sorry.
This is me. The second. I'm the.
Let's see, Marnie,
Yeah, but I,
how can I pronounce her name?
Marnie,
Marnie Sommer.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
and
Farjana,
here.
so the J is like Z, Farjana.
Yeah,
Okay.
Farjana, and then,
Jahan, that's bad, yeah.
and then I think that this is Julie Hennegan. She's, will be back in a second. Guys, Mina. Here, you know, which is yours? The acceptability of reuse?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's Mina Lee.
Okay.
I will be your timekeepers for the presentation. So you guys will have 15 minutes, but 12 minutes to present and then 3 for questions.
We're gonna talk really, really fast.
Okay, do you want me to like give you notice when the like 15 minutes are closing or the 12 for your presentation?
I think 12, and
Well,
we'll hopefully not go over, but you never know.
Another question, Q&A, do you want to handle or want me to handle the Q&A? It means open the micro, ask people to ask questions. I can do that or I can do it for ourselves.
Are we doing after each presentation?
Yeah, within the 15 minutes.
Okay, so we really need to finish so we can take questions. I don't care, I'm comfortable. with
No,
anybody.
the way it was perfect, because you're the guest.
I mean, I'll do it, that's just easier, but I need you to make sure that I, you know,
What about
have
you?
time for it.
I'll give you
Yeah, handle
the
it.
12
I'm good with whatever, you want consistency, whatever you want. Session, could you, or leaders, will bring up the way. Sounds just as you like.
Well, okay, hold on, I'll phone right, okay?
We want a special case, like,
So you walk up after.
right.
Don't touch my house and my wife.
That's good.
I mean, we're gonna talk before that, and then I'm trying to figure out.
It could take 30 seconds.
Yeah. Like they asked if, He wanted to, well, that's our moderator. He was asking if we wanted to manage our own questions for the 20 minutes. And we have time for them.
What did you say?
I said, I'm not consider.
Transmission Carlos. Sorry, the bus driver is in front of my home
Oh.
with my daughter and my wife is not there. No, but my wife's not, I mean, the bus is early, so
Okay.
that's not, shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
It should-
Yeah, I'm gonna.
The way you
have to
prefer, I'm just,
Do it myself.
because, okay, so.
Are you gonna like show us?
Yeah, I'll
the time to be on the.
Yeah, save the-
Right,
Yeah.
and the 3 minutes is until the 12 minute?
Yes, I'll give you a 12-minute presentation, then you have 3 minutes afterwards for Q&A.
So.
I know.
Get up with your question.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So everybody. That's good. How do you make hello?
So in real life, your face, I saw you in lunch, but I was like, that doesn't look so good.
Sorry,
Did you find your folder with them?
it's already you open.
Okay.
So.
Like you know the face, but not the.
Oh, your person, the body.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
What's up?
We even tell the about each other. Things like that.
So where are you from? From?
Yeah, that makes it a bit different. I know it shows, if it doesn't show me, then you're gonna get very confused about where I am. It feels like they're in the ourselves. Yeah. I'm not really, it doesn't look like you.
Okay, yeah, it's a great.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
I showed it to my friend.
Já pegou o país? Já pegou a Bahia? Então, ok. Eles me ligaram, esse evento acabou, então, ok. Então,
I don't know how it is, so.
Thank you.
eu acredito,
You just try to.
não tem problema. Então, tá bom. Não, eles me ligaram para cá. Durante a sessão como moderado, veio. Mas
Oh, I was so.
Yes.
My-
Well, because she said.
it's hard to,
Oh.
I mean, so,
Yeah.
We're gonna ask Mouse for us up there.
No, but you know better. No, I was like, oh.
They just changed it. We told them ages ago, like, someone else from the old. And then.
But nobody was gonna say except for the this one, right? So I was like, oh,
I was working in the morning, nothing else happened. It's like, work.
so they're letting them know. Here's the shot.
No, actually, I see all the department and I saw.
Right.
I'm like, well, I heard it was like.
He's in Sonic somewhere.
Both sides of different times.
Ah, legal. Tem uma menina brasileira, o nome dela é Gabriela,
Yeah.
Gabriela Marelli, ela está apresentando agora, inclusive. Mas se eu vai shopping, isso é, ela chega ali no meio. Tem um colega, o Márcio pensou no passado.
Legal. A gente se conta chave muito
Tá bom, pode.
So nice to gender. I didn't want to go down. I thought Ellie's name. Ellie's name. Oh, you did. So we kept up with.
1 minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also was so over that last week, and then I'll be under bed. I'm like, well, it's done, I get busted. And then when he's like, "Take this, but I'm let's get it going."
You don't know.
So start. Can everyone hear me? Okay, big room. So,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Probably should have slides. Oh.
So welcome everyone for this verbal presentation session. Just to be sure that you are in the right room. Our room is about menstrual hygiene management. So I know I've been a few times in the wrong room and only realize when the first presentation starts. So I always like to tell everyone which room you are so you don't get confused and go to the place you're supposed to be. So my name is Carlos. I'm a research assistant here at the Water Institute at UNC, and I'll be helping this session. And we have 4 presentations here today. I think we should start directly with the first one. And I'd like to call Farjana Jahan. Farjana Jahan. And she'll present about changes in the menstrual hygiene management facilities and usage among Bangladesh schoolgirls and its effect on school absenteeism from 2013 to 2018. Farjana, go ahead.
Thank you.
So, respected delegates from different parts of the world and my fellow presenters who are going to present some outstanding research findings in today's session, a very good afternoon. My name is Farjana Jahan. I'm a physician and an epidemiologist by training, and I'm currently working as an assistant scientist in environmental health and WASH in icddr. The session today I'm going to present is about how the menstrual hygiene management facilities and its uses among school girls have been changed over the years and how this has contributed to the absenteeism of the school-going girls. If I briefly talk about the menstrual hygiene management, it refers to the way in which a woman or girl deals with her menstruation. So girls usually menstruate between the age of 10 and 15 years. So learning about menstruation is a vital part of secondary school education, but it is not too early to aware them in the elementary school level as well, because some of the girls menstruate in the elementary school. Given the number of people affected by MHM in one way or either, it has been recently that has been MHM been recognized as a part of WASH. With the adoption of Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, MHM as a part of broader topic of WASH has been recognized worldwide. Over the last decades, many evidences have been generated how MHM is affecting the school girls, how it is creating a taboo among the society, and has identified the challenges, which includes limited or non-existent information about MHM before the menstrual onset, inadequate health education from teachers and peers for managing menses at school, and insufficient access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. Though numerous evidence-based intervention and advocacy platforms have emerged, but we're still waiting for a global guidelines on MHM and sport. So the situation I described so far is not very different in Bangladesh. Bangladesh, being a transition from low to middle income country, is focusing greatly on its infrastructure, and while it is focusing in its infrastructure development, it is also focusing on the washing schools. So this was led to baseline national hygiene survey in 2014, which has focused what was the current that time wash situation in Bangladesh. And National Hygiene Survey 2014 found that 41% girls missed classes during their menstruation, and on average 2.8 days missed schools during their menstruation. And cultural taboos, lack of proper education perpetuated the problem. So in 2018, another national hygiene survey was conducted to assess the changes in schools MHM over the year. So the objectives of our current research was to assess the changes in school absenteeism from the National Hygiene Survey 2014 to 2018, and to identify the factors that contributed to the changes in school absenteeism. So what we have done, we pulled the data from 2014 and 2018 National Hygiene Survey and analyzed the data of school components. And 2014, a nationally representative sample was selected from rural and urban areas within a two-stage cluster sampling, where a total of 2,333 school girls were selected. And in 2018, 176 enumeration areas were selected, and from each enumeration area, 7 schools were selected for the survey. As I said, in 2014, 100 clusters were selected, 50 urban and 50 rural. And from each cluster, 7 schools were selected. And 4 randomly selected girls from grade 2 to 9 were selected from each school. Where in 2018, the girls were selected from class grade 5 to grade 10, and the other selection criteria was same as in 2014. The data collection tool in 2014 were limited to the surveys and spot checks, while in 2018, observation was included as well. So based on the resident location, the study participants were divided into 2 groups, urban and rural. The urban population, both in 2014 and in 2018, were lower than the rural schools. But it has been noticed that from 2014 to 2018, the recruitment of young age girls were quite lower. So during the analysis, we seek to determine the changes in knowledge on menstruation, and we have seen the awareness on menstruation before menarche increased significantly, going from 36% in 2014 to 53% in 2018. However, the knowledge of implications of inadequate MHM practice decreased from 57% in 2014 to 42% in 2018. If we look at the changes in practice regarding menstrual hygiene, we can see the uses of disposable sanitary pads had increased dramatically, going from 10% in 2014 to 57% in 2018. So at the same time, the uses of reusable old cloth has decreased 82% to 38%. While there is a decline in disposing menstrual absorbents in open space, there was an increase in use of toilet pens for disposal, which also led to clogging or non-functional toilet in some instances. So there was no significant changes in the cleaning practice of reusable clothes between 2014 and 2018. But if we look at the MHM facilities in urban and rural schools, we can see that the proportion of schools with separate facilities for changing menstrual materials ascended from 3.3% to 8.3%. And with an increase from 3.4% to 22% in 2018, there was a significant improvement in the availability of bin for disposing menstrual products in toilet. The availability of hygiene kits were also increased significantly. And what is the situation about menstrual hygiene management education in schools, which is an integral part of the MHM components in schools? So in 2014, only 2.7% girls reported they were informed by their schools about menstrual hygiene management before menarche. But in 2018, 23% of girls reported they had been informed by their teachers about menstruation before their menarche. Additionally, there is an improvement in the percentage of students who receive menstrual hygiene counseling at any time by their teachers, which increased from 6.5% to 2014 to 20% in 2018. So if you look how this changes in schools, the facilities, the availability of hygiene kits, the education of the students about menstruation prior to the onset of menarche has contributed the school absenteeism from 2014 to 2018. The menstruation-related absences among students decreased on average from 25% to 14% in 2018. And the school girls were working 2014 and 2018. What are the reasons they missed schools during their menstruation? So let's look at how the responses have changed over time. So the number of students reporting a lack of separate place to change clothes ascended from 7.9% to 14% in 2018. That's an interesting finding, but because the separate facility for changing menstrual materials has increased over time, but even more girls reported that they need a separate place to change the menstruation materials. So we conducted a multivariate GE model analysis to examine what were the factors related to adolescent girls missing schools as a result of menstruation. And it showed that where we have thinking the changes in time that showed a significant association with absenteeism, with changes over time, the absenteeism decreased. And while adjusting the other factors, we found some factors are still contributing to this absenteeism. So the factors were one of those things living in the rural areas. So girls who lived in the rural areas had more absenteeism than girls living in the urban area. A considerable positive association was found who believe menstruation interferes with their academic performance and who are the parents who interferes with going to the schools of the student girls were found significantly associated with the absenteeism in the adolescent. And those who wear old clothes, the reusable old clothes or old rugs, were found to be higher absenteeism with higher absenteeism in school than girls who are using the disposable sanitary pads. So the key knowledge added by this research is that the rural residents' parental restriction and beliefs about menstruation is influencing absenteeism. Absenteeism decreased for 2014 to 2018, and social norms and stigma impacted school attendance. So broader comprehensive MHM education, access to hygienic materials, and supportive environments are crucial in menstrual hygiene management. So here are team members, and the project has been funded by Water Aid Bangladesh. Thank you all for your patience.
We're taking questions now. Just so we have 3 minutes for questions. So please raise your hand, identify yourself, and she'll be glad to answer. So
Sure.
It seemed like the reasons why students didn't come to school while they were menstruating, the one that was mentioned the most often was they felt uncomfortable. And it also remained unchanged. So it's not clear to me what they mean by that, because there were other categories for the facilities weren't adequate, et cetera. What was that captured?
Okay. Yeah, that when the students were asked, so why they didn't want to come to school during the menstruation, one of the things that girls said, they were, and that was very much associated with the core schools because they felt uncomfortable in the schools welcoming during the menstruation because they think they might stain their clothes and the other students or the boy students can make them uncomfortable. So that's one of the big reasons they became more conservative during their menstruation and they said it felt uncomfortable in sitting or standing.
And that remained unchanged despite the fact that other things changed. And
Yes,
I wonder what your
yes.
thinking is about that.
So when the facilities have improved, so that's one other thing, the facilities has been changed, but more focus should be on reducing the stigma or taboos around menstruation. Even the facilities are available, the social stigma or taboo and the menstruation are still there. So it should be around the social change, the norms where the girls or the parents should talk openly about the menstruation with their daughters or the school teachers should be more open. So this is still lacking not in Bangladesh, I think in other LMIC countries as well, where the facilities has been improvement. The government is focusing on more infrastructure, but it's not focusing on the social stigma reduction or talking more about in a social platform. Nobody still talks about menstruation in a social platform in countries like Bangladesh.
I have time for one more question, maybe that gentleman purple. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, and also associated with this, I'm wondering if one of the options for reasons given was pain, because globally we know that pain is like the main reason people miss out on anything during menstruation. So I'm wondering if that was included here.
After the pain, so pain was one of the components that was included here. We didn't keep it here because not significant amount of girls reported the pain as a component.
That's interesting.
So thank you, Farjana.
Thank you.
I'd like to call here Mina Lee. So she will present about the acceptability of reusable menstrual pads from the perspective of menstrual hygiene management in Bolivia. Mina?
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I was worried about that it might be end up presenting an empty room, but now I can see so many of you are here, and I feel like I'm hosting the world's most unexpected surprise party here. My name is Mina Lee, and I'm delighted to present my final study on the acceptability of the reusable menstrual pad from the perspective of menstrual hygiene management among women in Bolivia. I'm working in UNFPA Bolivia country office as an M&E specialist. I am interested in the menstruation, so that I was able to contribute to this pilot study. So first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to University North Carolina Water Institute to have this opportunity. So before starting the presentation, let me outline the agenda for today's presentation. I have 7 contents, but I will present briefly each section to meet the 15 minutes. I will try to do my best. So before exploring my research finding, let's provide some content in Bolivia. Bolivia is an ethnically and culturally diverse country. According to the census in 2012, almost 40% of the total population self-identified as one of the 36 indigenous population officially recognized. The Bolivian population is also young, with 4 out of 10 inhabitants between 10 to 29 years old. Over the last years, income equality has reduced and human development index has increased. However, the country is the lower middle income countries And furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to an unexpected economic crisis, with increased poverty and great difference among the most left behind populations, such as indigenous, rural women, young people, and adolescents. The country is top 10 most vulnerable countries to climate change globally, characterized by repeated flood and wildfire, which is especially impact indigenous women and adolescents. And menstrual hygiene management is a crucial aspect of women's health worldwide, and Bolivia is no exception. Reusable menstrual pads have emerged as a sustainable and cost-effective alternative to disposable pads in recent years around the world. However, their adoption among the women in Bolivia is still limited, and insufficient access to education and research on menstrual hygiene management. And Bolivia women still resort to using non-hygienic methods such as old clothes in the rural area. And in schools, there have inappropriate bathroom for menstrual and hygiene management, as you see in this picture. And this lack of the proper sanitation infrastructure can make it difficult to girls and women to manage their menstrual hygiene with dignity. And also, unlike other countries, Bolivia has not made progress in ensure free access to sanitary products, and 30% value-added taxes is applied. So evidence on reusable menstrual pads is very limited, especially in Bolivia context. My research aims at specific objectives for examining Bolivian females' acceptability of reusable menstrual pads and how they can improve their menstrual hygiene management. With a key objective, this research enabled to cover a range of the important aspects related to the menstrual hygiene management and the reusable pads. So to achieve this objective, we utilize the following methodology: quantitative method using the structural questionnaire 2 times. First was to collect information on participant menstrual experience, knowledge, and product use. And then we conducted a second survey, used Google survey to assess satisfaction after 2 months of use. We used convenience sampling to recruit 69 Bolivian women of reproductive age from 11 to 33 from 3 health centers that we already being intervened for another ongoing sexual reproductive health project in La Paz. And this pilot study was made possible through the generous donation of Hannapad, a top brand of reusable menstrual pad in Korea. This brand is well known for its certified organic cotton pad and known for their absorbency and comfort. It's important to note that these pads are not yet available in Bolivia or other parts of the Latin America as indicated on this map. So this the menstrual hygiene management kit that we distributed to participants contain small, medium, and overnight size of Hannapad, along with the laundry soap, pouch, and the instruction leaflet. I have those pads, so if anyone want to see, I can show you after the finish this presentation. And now let's move on the most exciting part, key findings. The result of our research are as follows. 99% of them use disposable sanitary pad, and the majority of the respondents choose menstrual products based on their affordability, with the cheap price being a main criteria. A significant 59% of respondents reported not managing menstrual pain effectively. Noteworthy, 74% of respondents have experienced hesitancy when buying menstrual products. And according to the knowledge of the reusable menstrual pads, more half of them did not know or did not hear about those pads. And 68.4% of them said that it would be difficult to find those pads in the store in Bolivia. And more than 50% of participants thought washing and managing those pads would be difficult. So after 2 months of using reusable menstrual pads, we found that reusable menstrual pads were generally acceptable and beneficial alternative to disposable pads. Over 80% of participants reported satisfaction with non-blood linkage, reduced expensive and comfort. And some users experienced improved overall health and reduce menstrual pain while using reusable pads. And also 76% of them express a desire to continue using reusable pads. And significantly 90% of participants would recommend those pads to friends or a person one knows. And however, there still are some challenges both reusable menstrual pad and menstrual hygiene management in Bolivia. Participants face challenges related to the washing reusable pad, citing difficulties and time-consuming aspects as challenges. And many participants didn't understand the meaning of the minute, and there were misconceptions such as believing that menstrual caused body weakness, and they also had a strong belief that during the menstrual does not lead to pregnancy. A respondent expressed a negative attitude toward the menstruation when they started to the menstruation the first time, and they was not happy. The over 78% of them they had a negative attitude to menstruation. And also they are likely to use indirect words to describe the menstruation to other people. So in conclusion, the research shed light on the challenges and opportunities surrounding menstrual hygiene management in La Paz, in Bolivia. The majority of participants still primarily rely on disposable menstrual pad, with cost being primary deciding factor. The research emphasized the promising potential of a reusable menstrual pad in Bolivia, highlighting their acceptability, cost effectiveness, and positive impact on women's well-being. To fully realize these benefits and overcome exciting challenges, efforts should focus on improving accessibility, addressing washing concern, and providing accurate and accessible menstrual health education. These steps can contribute to a more comfortable and healthier experience for women during their menstrual cycle in Bolivia. And 3 recommendations are provide affordable access. Efforts should be made to lower prices of menstrual products, including reusable menstrual pads, to make them more affordable for women in Bolivia. And comprehensive menstrual health education is very necessary. Implement comprehensive menstrual health education programs in schools, especially starting at the early age, to provide accurate information about the menstruation hygiene and the use of the menstrual product, including reusable pad or reusable pad or a menstrual cup as well. And this education should also address common misconceptions and taboos. And further research is very necessary, conducting further quantitative and qualitative research to identify the evolving needs and preference and access to menstruation knowledge and perceptions. So, I invite any questions you may have. Is there any questions related to this further study?
Thank you, Mira. You did it one time before the time, so I have more time for the questions. So.
I was wondering if the menstrual kits had underwear in them as well. That's a very big problem that we see with pads, fabric, and if no, was that an issue for using the pads?
The reusable menstrual pad?
If the menstrual kits that you distributed had underwear, and if no, was that an issue?
There was not issues to utilize this pad because we already provide the proper introduction and with using the video, so that they are likely to use this pad without any problems.
Did they have underwear though?
No, they don't have we don't provide any underwear, but they can't use with their underwear.
That they wear them?
Yeah, that they wear them.
Good question. I was wondering if you could go back to the slide where it talks about the misconception of the menstrual knowledge. What were the biggest takeaways from this? What were the biggest gaps that you saw in menstrual knowledge?
Well, this is my pilot studies, and in Bolivia, actually, they don't have a lot of research related to the reusable menstrual pad. So we had to we had to lack of the knowledge, lack of the research. But the most important thing that bloating causes the body because they have an incorrect answer. At the same time, they also have a misconception about bathing. So they believe that bathing is very, very dangerous during the menstruation. So they avoid to bath during the menstruation. Yeah. We have to teach the proper education in Bolivia as soon as possible.
Yeah, I have a question about the standardization of the reusable pads that you're using. Who is providing that standardization? Because one of the challenges we're finding is that in a lot of contexts, especially during COVID, there was this huge influx of reusable pads, but there isn't standardization of the materials, the cotton content, the fluff content, et cetera, and also the ministries of health have been very reluctant to standardize. So,
Yes. Actually, we was choose this path because this company has a program of social CSI, corporate social responsibility. So that I contacted this company to donate from the Korean to Bolivia, and UNFPA has strict the requirement to donate and to deliver to other countries. So we had to provide a technical document from the HANAPET. So the UNFPA headquarters had to review all the technical review about these materials.
I was curious, you said the Hannah pads were not available in the local market, but is there any reusable menstrual pads in the market?
Actually, in Bolivia, as I know, there is I didn't find out the visual pad in La Paz, even if I live in a capital. But I asked my friends and my coworkers, do you know reusable sanitary pad? They said, no, I don't know, what is this? So it's still lack of the menstrual product in Bolivia, and even if they don't know exactly the menstrual cup as well.
I have another question. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the barriers. I know you had mentioned washing was a big barrier, but could you go into more details about what were the barriers a little bit more in depth?
This is my limitation of my research because I didn't really conduct the qualitative research. I just only focus on the quantitative research. This is my limitation. So if I have a chance, I really wanted to do the qualitative research to figure out more about the barriers.
Okay. Thanks.
That's all.
Yeah, it's our time now.
Thank you very much.
So next presentation, I'd like to call Marnie Sommer. She'll talk about multi-city menstrual friendly public toilet study, policy, practice, and advocacy.
let's
Sorry about that. I'm going to be presenting as quickly as possible to stick to time with my colleague, Dr. Andrew Morocco, who was a co-investigator on this study. And we have colleagues from Rio and Manila who were also co-investigators on this study with us. So this was the multi-city menstrual-friendly public toilet study that we did over the last year. You may ask, what do we mean by menstrual-friendly public toilet? I think probably everyone in this room knows about public toilets and has opinions about them. So basically, it's just a public toilet. You can debate what that means, you know, for the rest of the day. But it has the basic aspects of a public toilet that we would want to see: safe, clean, accessible, all the things you all know very well. In addition, there are some menstrual-friendly aspects, such as discreet disposal, waste management, free or low-cost products, and also a mirror for seeing menstrual stains on your clothing, which probably some people in this room have never thought about, but you should think about it. And that was a photo from Osaka, which was one of the sites. It is not a perfect menstrual toilet, but it certainly has some nice features.
Why did we want to do this study? Well, a lot of people are menstruating every day around the world. They are navigating the public domain, they're going shopping, they're going on buses, they're visiting relatives, they're going to work. And they may need to change a pad or tampon, deal with something on the way. And public toilets are often insufficient, obviously in general, but particularly for managing menstruations around the world, or at least that was our hypothesis, having traveled and lived in different places. So our aims were quite simple: to assess and understand the menstrual-friendly characteristics of public toilets across 6 cities globally, and to identify challenges and opportunities for improving them. Very small budget study, but we thought we could do a lot with our wonderful leads around the world. So we made a thoughtful decision, consulting many smart people to make this global. I know this conference doesn't focus on all parts of the world, but we did New York. Convenient, we live in New York. We did Rio, we did Barcelona, we did Kampala, Manila, and Osaka for many different reasons, but we wanted a range of income level cities with all different types of toilets in them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the methods because we have 12 minutes, but we are happy to talk to anybody more. But essentially, we had teams of students led by the researcher in each city, and Natalie, who's here today, trained them all, do audits of 4 sites in each city, which I'll mention in a minute. 500-meter radiuses were defined around each of those sites. And so there was this audit with the menstrual-friendly public toilet audit tool, which we're going to share widely once we just update the draft that we used. And some key informant interviews, a select number in each city just to start learning, governments, advocates, menstrual product companies, folks we thought could tell us a little bit about things. So in each city, we picked a business area, a transit hub, a tourist area, and a residential park or plaza. Obviously, some cities like New York, where we live, have many of these districts or sites, but we just chose one in each city so we could do a little bit of learning. The tool, which again, we're going to share widely, had 3 different sections essentially, but we looked at structure and quality of facilities, whether they're standalone, attached to a building, if you needed a lock or a key, fees, signage, if there was light, what kind of water, soap, paper towels, ventilation, so on, cleanliness. We looked at stalls in cubicles. Did they have a product disposal container? Was it accessible? Mirror, all the things with menstrual management, which I just mentioned, including if products were available and if they cost anything. Oopsie. And now I'm going to attempt to turn this over to Andy.
Thanks, Mike. It's juicy. The audit Mark just talked about created a tremendous amount of variables, and in 4 minutes I'm going to go through each. I won't, but what we did do to make it a little easier to understand is we made an index out of this. And to create the overall index, first we broke into 6 domains. The domains had values 0 to 1, which is really just a proportion of each variable that went into the domain that either met the criteria or didn't meet the criteria. And you can see them listed there: access, safety, structure, availability of general resources, cleanliness, and MHH resources. And then we made a full index, which is simply an average of those, not weighted, very simple, so it's easy to understand for me. As a geographer, I put the maps in. These are the cities, and these are the locations we looked at. The kind of gray circles are the study areas, 500 meters around a centralized site, and the dots are the facilities. Just for this part of the presentation, facility means, like in the US, we'd call a bathroom, and the toilet are the individual toilets or stalls within it. So it could be standalone with just one, or it could be more. And just looking at these data, which are the counts, and if you look at the densities, they look quite similar. There's a lot of range if you look at between neighborhood type or between city. For instance, like transit areas had a tremendous number compared to the others, and residential area had quite a few, which may be logical, may not, depending on the city. And across the city, it's the same thing, with Osaka having quite a few public toilets, and New York and Kampala seeming to have like fewer facilities, but in New York, they were quite large, so there was a lot of toilets within it. So this is kind of how the index ended up being made. If you can have your eyes bleed and look at the table on the right, those are the variables that went into each domain, and then those domains were collapsed into the general index. Just to go through a few that we found were interesting. Less than 20% of the facilities we looked at were accessible 24/7, which we know is really important for MHH, particularly for vulnerable populations in urban areas. Just over half had functional hooks or shelves, which you also know is important. Resources like soap and liquid dispensers were inadequate overall, we thought. Only around half the facilities had lined or lidded disposal bins. These are the bins right near the toilets meant for MHH products. And fewer than 3% had any sort of menstrual products, free or otherwise. Looking at everything together, all right, I'm gonna go 5 seconds over 4 minutes. So these data for the whole thing is gonna be biased towards those with most facilities because it's simply across everything. So Osaka is and Barcelona is gonna dominate it a little bit, but the safety seemed pretty good overall. So 0.91, meaning 91% of the criteria were met across the facilities. The ones that are much more concerning are the access scores, which are things like signage and needing permission to get in there, so accessibility, and the MHH resources themselves, which is 0.49, so 49% of the criteria were met. Overall, the characteristics of facilities varied across cities and site types, and there's a lot of different combinations, different ways to slice it that we don't have time for. The safety was overall okay. Tremendous lack of MHH products and disposal bins and MHH specific resources. Relatively higher number of facilities in transit areas, but the business areas tended to be a little more MHH friendly. And finally, the residential areas had very few overall, very low density and very low scores. So again, one could argue that the low density is understandable. Maybe there's less need, there's less daytime population, there's like people moving throughout the city for work or whatnot. But you can't really argue about the lower quality, because even if you have one restroom, it needs certain facilities to be, menstrual hygiene friendly. So that's back to one. Is that 4 minutes?
Yeah, I don't even know, but that was great. Okay, we're flying through here. So just to talk very briefly about the key informant interviews. I'm not going to have to read through slides, but I just tried to pick a quote from each city just to sort of make the point. You can see from both Barcelona and Manila, people didn't know what we were talking about when we did the interviews, which was theme 1, a lack of familiarity. Probably half the people in this room weren't quite sure what we were talking about either, to be fair. So it is a new idea. Our feeling, nowhere to go but up. But people were intrigued. Some people were not intrigued, but there was interest. Oftentimes, the first thing they thought of was products, and we have a much more holistic concept of what this means. And then they would think of disposal. Toilet design and safety limitations. So just to clarify, Andrew was talking about how the facilities themselves, like they're not going to collapse on you, were deemed safe. But in terms of social safety and people being concerned they would be attacked or something would happen to them or they were nervous about using them, that came out in a number of sort of the interviews as an issue potentially. But essentially, safe, clean toilets are central to menstrual friendliness, which is no surprise. Let's see. Again, just picked a quote from Kampala, which I thought sort of spoke to what the next sort of overall thematic finding was that there are very little efforts to even tackle this issue. Many of you are aware, there is a whole menstrual health and hygiene agenda out there. But when it came to this issue of menstrual friendly toilets, lack of champions across cities, either for advocacy or policy. I mean, we did talk to sort of government folks in New York and the other cities. No guidelines, nobody sort of knew where to even start. And also interestingly, gender equity came up in some of the interviews, but not really in thinking about menstruation, even though it's so obviously a part of that. This quote I just picked from New York, it really gets at, if anybody's been there, everybody just goes to Burger King and McDonald's to use the bathrooms. Of course, you have to pay. So overall supply was inadequate across all 6 cities, variable quality, a lot of variation, sort of standalone versus attached to buildings, articulation that basically there's not enough urban space to put more toilets, and also that temporary options like porta potties or particularly seasonality beach-based toilets were often deemed inadequate. And then lastly, this quote from Rio just gets at some of the operations and maintenance issues with everyone in this room who's a wash person knows. That was raised partly as a challenge, but also as an excuse. This articulation, they wouldn't be able to do something, it would be another burden. Rarely is it mentioned as part of a public health mandate. And one of the things I didn't say, which again wouldn't surprise you, is in terms of who's in charge, very unclear, a very sort of diffuse responsibility, lots of agencies, not really clear mandates, and so on. So key takeaways, the concept in existence is unaddressed and not really understood. I got 1 minute, I can do that. Mainstreaming menstrual-friendly components would address gender inequities in public spaces. That should be our reason right there to do this. The MFPT audits and champion groups are needed. We are hoping to spawn 1,000 flowers. We will give you our tool. Please go do this study on your own. It's not hard. Data on effective designs, resourcing, user preferences is also needed. Just to acknowledge, we had a wonderful team of co-investigators, a wonderful team in New York at Columbia, and then all these great students who participated in our funding, generously provided by the Osprey Foundation and the Sid and Helene MHM Faculty Support Funding. Thank you. Okay.
And before the questions, I'll just make a comment for myself. I graduated from UFRJ, that's Brazilian university that my colleague Natalia is from there.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see a university that I graduated 10 years ago to be here with you.
How were the toilets?
Huh? The civil engineer school was terrible.
Terrible. I would
Yeah.
like you to know there are no free products in the bathrooms here. So UNC, you could do something about that. Are there any questions? If so, Andrew has to come up here and answer them. Yeah.
Does your tool address the lack of access to public toilets? I know you talked about that at the end, but is that incorporated into measuring that in the tool? Because I know if you go to a lot of urban centers in the US,
Yeah.
like you can't find a public toilet, you have to go purchase something to use.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
really hard for health population.
Yeah, it does. Do you want to answer that?
You could probably do it better, but that,
No, you
you're right. And that's a problem of what a public toilet actually is, right? What is accessible to the public and then what's actually public. Because what's accessible to the public isn't accessible to everybody equally. We did a study not long ago with homeless population in New York and access to toilets. And it was really alarming, right? There's very few. So you go to a bookstore, you go to they don't have bookstores anymore. You go to a coffee shop, you know, they make you buy something and so that's why we didn't include those in this study at all. So we're not including any private toilets that are used by some part of the population. It's truly public. And the definition is a little complicated. Marnie knows it better than I do, but it has to be publicly funded and accessible to everyone equally, was the idea there.
Yeah,
Hi, I'm sorry if I missed this in the method section that,
we flew through it.
toilets were audited, like for which sex? Was it male toilets or female toilets were audited? Because I didn't know if outside of US, gender inclusive toilets.
Yeah.
Are there?
Yeah. Do you want to? We did female toilets and gender neutral toilets, right? Yeah. Much discussion, but that's what we ended up doing. Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed that a number of the 6 domains felt like they would be more widely applicable to sort of public toilets in general beyond a focus on menstruation. Obviously you need sort of the basics to have a menstruation friendly toilet.
Yeah.
But just wondering if you can speak to how your team is thinking about that in terms of how the scale should be used. And then also if there's maybe potential there for like wider traction for policy adoption if there's a wider sort of application.
Yeah, I might let Andrew speak to anything having to do with the index. What I would say, to be very frank, we saw menstruation, not just me, as a way to bring some leverage to this long struggling issue. I was in Finland a few summers ago. They have phenomenal public toilets. I have never seen public toilets like that myself anywhere. I don't know that they have products in them. So I think the thought was public toilets are not good anywhere. There is a body of menstruating people who are getting more and more loud about their rights. And maybe if we look at this issue from that angle, both because they deserve to have dignity when managing when they're on the move, but also because maybe we will bring some new energy and leverage to the public toilet issue. So we are having a meeting in New York, I see the time, to discuss all of this. But I think our hope is to begin an agenda or to sort of kickstart an agenda, and we will talk through what is the best way. I mean, I think basically you need decent public toilets. And the idea is that the menstrual friendly stuff just gets mainstreamed into that, not as a separate agenda. I don't think any of us think a separate agenda is
gonna get very far. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Marnie. Very good presentation. So our next presenter is Julie Hennegan, and she'll talk about the menstrual practice needs scale short form development and validation in Bangladesh and Uganda. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. I'm now standing between everyone and drinks, which is like not a good place to be. So great to have so many people in the room to talk about menstrual health and menstrual hygiene. I'm gonna a little bit take the liberty of assuming that since you came to a session about menstrual health and hygiene, that you're on board, that this is an important part of life for women and girls and people who menstruate, and jump straight into talking about the measure and some work that we've done to develop a short form version of the menstrual practice needs scale, or MPNS. The MPNS was published in 2020, and it's a 36 item tool, or 28 items plus another 8 if you use reusable absorbents, that measures the extent to which a respondent's menstrual blood management needs and environments met their needs or were perceived to meet their needs during their last menstrual period. Said another way, it's really about whether or not you had a positive experience of managing your menstrual bleeding. That's not to say this is measuring all menstrual health related needs. There are tons of the things that we need to be measuring when we're thinking about menstrual health, education and information, experience of supportive social environment. But this measure really focuses on that aspect of having sufficient materials, facilities, and services for caring for your body during menstruation. And there are a number of different types of studies or research where we might be wanting to measure this, from an NGO or a formative study going in and wanting to understand what proportion of the population is having difficulty with menstruation and what specific needs are more challenging for them. Also, when we're wanting to do research, we have a lot of hypotheses about the impact that having a difficult time during your period has on your health, your well-being, education. If we want to quantitatively test those associations, then we need to be able to measure the constructs that we're interested in, like having a negative experience of managing your menstrual bleeding. Similarly, or on the other side, if we want to look at risk factors for a negative menstrual experience, again, we need to be able to measure it. And finally, when we're testing interventions, a lot of our intervention theory of change includes that our intervention is going to improve your experience of managing your period. That means that whether it's a primary outcome or a mediator, we need to be able to measure it. I'm mostly talking today about the MPNS as used among adolescents. There is an adult version that we have published, but I just do not have time to talk about how that relates to this right now. So the scale allows you to calculate a total score as well as scores for subscales or different dimensions of menstrual practice needs. This includes perceiving needs as being met around materials and the home environment, transporting materials in the school environment, reusing materials, so washing and drying, as well as insecurities and worries about the reliability of your menstrual absorbents, changing and disposing of them, and insecurities or again worries about laundering materials. And so we have people using the tool for lots of different purposes, and feedback that 36 items is too long. We're already struggling with survey real estate, the classic problem for anyone who's developed a survey probably ever. So we decided we were going to develop a shorter version of the scale for people to use in various different situations. We took a really theory-led approach to developing a short form. There is an approach to short form development where you take the highest loading items on each factor and that's your short form. We really totally threw that out the window and wanted this to be led by what we felt was most important to be measuring and to maintain the face validity of the tool. For those of you who are familiar with the questions, they're Like they really are what they say on the tin. Did you have enough materials? Were you satisfied with the space you used for changing? Could you change when you wanted to? So we wanted to keep that element of the tool. And we also wanted to keep some of the breadth of topics or different practices that we were asking about. I think one of the advantages of the MPNS is that it forces people to ask about practices across the spectrum of things you need to do to manage your menstrual bleeding. It's really easy if you're doing an intervention focused on products to then only ask questions about whether or not someone had enough products and to ignore challenges around disposing or changing materials or other things like that. So the MPNS kind of forces you to measure across that experience. And we wanted to keep forcing people to do that. So we wanted to make sure that we kept the breadth of practices when we developed the short form. The others are a couple of other key considerations that are probably most interesting to people who are using the tool, but I'm going to indulge you by talking about them briefly anyway. One is eligibility. So there are questions in the scale that are not relevant if you're not reusing materials or aren't relevant if you aren't disposing of materials. We made an intentional decision from the start that we were going to keep those questions in the tool, even though they're really annoying when you're the data analyst and wanting to do the psychometrics. And that's because disposing of materials or your experience of laundering them is incredibly important if you need to undertake those tasks. The other thing that adds to the current length of the MPNS is that there are items that are location specific. So we ask about experiences of using the changing locations that you have at home and the locations that you have at school for girls. And this is, again, something that's really important because your experience of being able to change your materials, the privacy, the safety, as we've just heard about, changes radically depending on the environment in which you're accessing a toilet or a place to change your materials. And for most of the purposes of using the scale, a needs assessment, being able to capture this construct for looking at consequences or risk factors, or even for interventions, these locations remain relevant. And so we wanted to still maintain the different locations in the tool, even as we develop the short form. And finally, part of what also makes the tool longer is that we have positively orientated questions. Were you satisfied? Did you have enough? And negatively orientated items that are about, were you concerned there wouldn't be somewhere to dispose? Were you worried someone was going to see you when you were changing the materials? This adds to the number of subscales and it adds to the number of items, but we've seen across every data collection that we've done using the tool so far, or that other people have done, that we have much greater explanatory power when we combine these things rather than keeping them in, if we were to separate out and only ask in one orientation. I also like that for respondents, it offers a more balanced perspective in asking about their period rather than just being negative all the time. So in addition to these really sort of a priori theory-led decisions that we were making about the short form, we were also considering a number of other things, the performance of the items in factor analyses that had been done across different data sets, the inclusion of individual MPNS items as recommended indicators for national monitoring. We didn't want to suddenly throw those items out and then not have comparable data. And we undertook some primary work. So we did cognitive interviews with adolescent girls in Bangladesh. This was part of work to revalidate and translate the tool for that context, but we also had girls in pairs do a participatory activity saying, hey, we can't ask all of these questions, help us. What do you think are the most important questions to be asking, important or less important questions to be asking to understand your experiences? And so we took all of these different considerations together, as well as, again, the data performance of the different items to essentially prioritize all of the different items in the scale and make decisions about what should be included in the short form. I have thoughts about every single item and I'm happy to talk about them, but you definitely don't want me to do that here. After developing the candidate short form, we then looked at its performance in terms of its dimensionality, internal consistency, and validity, so its relationship with other concepts that we expect to be related to it. In a number of data sets. We had two primary data sets from Khulna, Bangladesh, which I'll talk about briefly. And we also went back to the original data from Soroti, Uganda from the development of the tool. The two data sets that we used from Bangladesh were part of a pilot survey and then a subsequent baseline for the adolescent menstrual experiences and health cohort study that we're doing there. The pilot survey was just over 300 menstruating girls that we were sort of using as a pilot for our methods as well as measure development. And then 7 months later, when we did the cohort baseline to establish the cohort that we're doing, we had a larger number of 891 menstruating girls. We only used the short form in the cohort, so we looked at the sort of comparative data for the pilot and then at the structural and validity performance in the cohort baseline. I'm not going to talk you through all the factor analysis because drinks that you all get to. But the original 6-factor structure of the data was the best fit still, despite the reduced number of items. We essentially cut the scale in half, so it's a total of 18 items, 14 plus 4 for those reusing. And the 6-factor structure was an acceptable fit in all of the data sets that we had available to have a look at this in. In terms of validity, we found that the short form was a reasonable approximation of the full measure. We observed all the same relationships that we expected to see between a negative or, the scale is coded positively, so higher scores are a more positive experience of menstruation. We saw that associated with mental health, which is the DAS, experiencing difficulty participating or missing school during the last period, and confidence to manage menstruation at home and at school. We saw the same pattern of significant associations that we expected to see with those concepts, with a slight attenuation of the effect sizes. But we thought that was pretty reasonable given we're essentially losing half the information that we were collecting. I think I maybe have like 1 minute to add in. My saddest loss was that we did lose, the only sort of topic related area that we lost was around transporting materials between home and school. It's always been one of my favorite questions and I'm sad to have lost it, but it constantly causes problem with factors. So we did make some data driven decisions, as well as mostly decisions based on theory. All of which is to say the short form represents a reliable and valid way to assess menstrual blood management experiences. The original is probably best placed if you're wanting a more detailed needs assessment. The short form will be a good fit for those who have limited survey real estate. I then got stressed that you're all going to be like 18 still too long. And so went back and was like, okay, we can do 9. But there is some sacrificing there in terms of dimensionality and validity. And I think that a 9-item version is something that's feasible, but probably more appropriate for studies that focus on topics beyond menstrual health, but want to include a menstrual health component. We're doing more research right now on the predicted validity of the MPNS, as well as many other things over time. And we're excited to see data from use of the MPNS in interventions to see how responsive it is to change. So huge thank you to everyone who supported this, this work and all of the collaborators that have been involved. Happy to answer the rest.
Questions?
Yeah.
And this is about the applicability of your opinion. I know you only just touched on it at the end. So there's you said that it's research. We could be making case for advocating in programs as well, that the rapid form or even the short version, I don't want to just jump to the rapid form only. But we use within the programs, surveys that are ongoing and those aspects as well, just to give us both sides of the research.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends on the research question. As I said, I think if that needs assessment, that could be a research study or it could be practitioners coming in and wanting to understand needs. But of course, if you're doing other qualitative work that's doing some of that in depth, and then you want prevalence estimates, maybe the short form is going to be enough for that. I've found that NGOs in using it often just use the individual item responses as a really useful description of what people's experiences are in the context. But if you're an NGO and you're calculating, pre-post data or things like that, then yeah, using the short form as a way to score experience and then compare it over time or associate it with other variables, then the short form will probably fit the bill for you. Yeah.
was curious if, what the time length difference was. You talked about the number of questions, but, was that just proportional to the number of questions, or was there a different ratio of amount of time saved with the shorter part?
Good question. It's really hard to get ODK to tell you the full length for the specific section of your survey. We have definitely had efforts to try and get people to note it. There is an activity at the start of the MPNS to describe the responding. In 12 minutes, I didn't get to talk about everything. It's a 4-item response scale, so never, less than half the time, or some of the time, more than half the time, always. And we have a short activity at the start, particularly for adolescent populations who aren't familiar with that. So that time burden is the same, but yes, it does cut the survey down significantly. The amount of time it takes to complete it is really variable by context and age and how familiar the population is with responding. But with the short form, I mean, we put this in a much bigger survey that I would think like under 10 minutes, you should be able to get through it, even with an enumerator, like verbally administering the questions.
Okay, thank you all. We still have about 10 minutes. And if we have more questions, I think I'd like to invite all the speakers to come to the table. And I have 10 minutes for questions. So please, that's the opportunity for asking anything about the subject, of course. And please come over here, all the presenters. So, more questions, please raise your hand, and we still have 2 minutes. Let's make a good use of them.
I have a question for you, and I was wondering if in your how-to guides for using the full form versus the short form versus the rapid, you clearly outline the pitfalls of going from one to another of like, these are the constructs you're not going to be measuring. Because that may be helpful for folks as they're like, well, I want the shortest possible.
Yeah.
This is what I'm gonna leave on the table.
That's my huge anxiety about the rapid form as, and the reason I definitely lost sleep over like, let's not put it out there at all, because then people can use it. Yes, what I realized I didn't put on the slides is that we do have a website, menstrualpracticemeasures.org, that has a user guide and all the information about the tool. We are currently in the process of revamping it, so we'll have a much more new and improved website coming at the end of the year. And yes, we are also revising all of our guidance to try and streamline everything to make it clearer for users what they should be using and when, and all the questions that we regularly get about the scoring. And we're looking at some weighting stuff at the moment as well in response to interventions.
I have a question. I'm with Team Rubicon, a disaster response organization, and I was wondering if any of you had experience in the disaster space and if you had any recommendations for best practices or a place I could find resources that would help us better manage menstruation during emergency context.
Yeah. Yes, we back in 2015 had funding from ELRA, the British government, and then we had follow-on funding from the US government to do research on MHM and emergencies. And so we developed, it was ourselves and the International Rescue Committee in partnership with about 27 international humanitarian response organizations or UN agencies, published the MHM Emergencies Toolkit. There's a long and a short version, similar to Julie's long and short survey. And then following on that, we developed with the US funding, government funding, a compendium on disposal and waste management and laundering in emergencies. Because we found that when we did the toolkit research, there was very little available on good practices for laundry disposal and waste management. So there are those 2 documents on our website. And then an MSF colleague who was part of those studies asked us why we didn't do anything on Ebola. So we fortunately got a little bit of funding, and then COVID happened, and the best thing in the world is that none of the emergencies people could go anywhere, so they had to do interviews with us. We could find them all, which was often a challenge. So we did interviews and developed a guidance note on responding to MHM in Ebola, context of Ebola, which is more complicated, right? So sometimes it's the national government, sometimes it's humanitarian, but Because of the contingent over bleeding and, not everything that bleeds with Ebola, it seemed important to do some work on that. So all three of those are available on our website. The guide, the original toolkit is in French and I think Arabic. I don't remember if we have other languages, but happy to, if you just go to the gate team, Natalie on my team, giving it to you right there, just carry her around with you everywhere you go. Anyway, so yes, and there are many other people. There was quarterly UNFP and UNHCR had a quarterly meetings. It slowed down a little, but they're actually going to have one in a few weeks to look at what is happening. And there are some like Oxfam and IFRC both have some nice publications out there, and UNICEF.
Thank you.
Can I just, I know there are a lot of questions, but those folks online also have questions. If you allow me, I'm going to ask some of those questions, okay? So they have the opportunity. So I'm going to ask 3 questions here, so and you can move from there. So the first question is not directly addressed, is how do you address the issue of behavioral change while using reusable pads? So I don't know who wants to answer this question. Second question, in areas where there's water scarcity and sometimes of poor quality, how do you maintain, sorry that I lost here the decide to break, okay. And last one, to Dr. Julie, GDD MPNS short form covers only need assessment or factor assessment, what are the differences? Okay, so 3 questions. So you want to start?
Reusable. I think the first question is for me.
Oh, yeah.
But can you repeat again the questions?
How do you address the issue of behavior change while using reusable pads? Behavior change.
Because I decided to conduct the pilot study in Bolivia using the reusable sanitary pad because they don't know exactly the alternative menstrual product. They only focus on the disposable pads. Tapon not at all, as they didn't use tapon as well. So only the reusable pad, only the sanitary pad. That's why I really wanted to provide an alternative way to Bolivia women and adolescents because they are likely to afraid of going to schools and companies because they don't have enough clean the toilet in the schools, so that it would be better to provide some alternative products such as a reusable sanitary pad, and also it made from the Korea because in Bolivia there are a lot of high reputation of Korean product because of the K-drama or K-pop. So that it would be better to provide some option to them. Yeah, that's all.
Maybe I can add another thing to the reusable pad. So we have conducted studies both in schools and slums about the acceptability and of these reusable cloth pads. So in schools, we found the acceptability increased after when we approached the teachers to talk to the girls and conduct the behavioral change sessions about how they should wash and use their clothes. But in slum context, that was a bit different. So we have piloted another product, which is we called washer and dryer. So that because in slum context, so the washing and drying place, it's shared by all. So they can't wash or dry their reusable clothes in that open space. So we piloted a washer and dryer where they can wash and dry their clothes. I wish I could have, but if anyone is interested to see how that product looks and how that works, I can send it to you. So we found that it received high acceptability and usability in the slum context.
Really?
Yeah, so the challenge about having 12 minutes is that it would take at least that long to explain what factor analysis is. So I guess I would just say a needs assessment, when we're talking about that, we mean just trying to understand the distribution of different needs among different, individuals in a population. Factor analysis is a way of looking at the consistency or the sort of distribution of responses in a scale and understanding what items hang together. So what items are likely to be being answered similarly or in a similar pattern. And so understanding that items that grouped together in a factor are more likely to be representing a more sort of consistent construct than items that load on separate factors. And they're given a factor loading weight, which is their association with a sort of factor score that is a representation of that cluster of items. Sorry, that's my bad on the fly.
Thank you. Now it's open for the public. Please raise your hand. You raised first and then I need to. Yeah.
Cal, great, for the panel there, this morning there was discussion about water and then sanitation and then hand hygiene. And oh, by the way, mental health, over the last 4 seconds of the slides, nothing fits in that. But how do we as an audience put this front and center? These data are coming in, we're getting to this point there. And I'm just curious for us as a group to say, this is such an important part. What can we do to help drive that change and accelerate it beyond the surveys? They're incredibly important to put in there, but I think we just need to start thinking a little bit on the next level. Your thoughts on that? Maybe it's going to happy hour for those.
Before you answer, I'd like to ask you to your question, and then everyone does your final comment because they're about to finish. So please go ahead and then you can answer him and her, please.
Hi, everyone. Emily Cruz from Splash. So, we hear from Marnie about this amazing index for facilities. We hear from Julie and all of our other speakers about their experiences with girls and the MNP, which Splash has also, we've been working on adopting into our survey, so love it that it's shorter now. So we have these amazing ways.
It takes time.
Good questions I need to answer. So MH is complex. There's a lot of behavioral constructs in it. And I'm just wondering from these amazing researchers in front of us, what's the next frontier? What's the next construct that we're unpacking? Is it wellness? Is it bodily autonomy? Is it self-efficacy? Like, where are we going next to understand the next component of MH? What excites you in the research space now that we've looked at practices and needs and facilities and things like that?
You mean it?
Okay, just who wants to answer and then we finish.
You mean in terms of measure development?
Yes.
I think probably everyone at this table might have a different answer. My answer to you is I'm better understanding menstrual health literacy, not knowledge. And someone needs to go and do a PhD on a set of knowledge questions that are appropriate for different ages and a kind of core set of MH knowledge that you need at different life stages. I would love to see that measure. And there's so much work that needs to go into that. It's probably more than a whole PhD, but that's just my personal. Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, given the time, I'm gonna let others handle the measures question. I would say to Kellogg's question, I don't have an answer. But I would say, once governments and NGOs and researchers actually start to build menstrual health into their programming and their measurement and assessments and reporting, then it will become something that matters. There is a group of us working with an even larger group that was referenced by Tom and Rick this morning on these indicators, prior 20 to 21 indicators for girls. If those start to get taken up, if we start to have data from every country on the problem, then you can't ignore it anymore. It's very easy to ignore something that you can't say, look at the baseline here, look at the situation. So I think having baseline data across countries that really shows why this matters. And then also interventions that governments, sign on to and really, find compelling. But it may also be bilaterals demanding that when you do a program and water sanitation or anything else, that you include menstrual health as a component, because it is kind of mind-boggling that it's so many people in the world, and it continues to be for those of us who work in it a real struggle. A happy group struggling along together, but a struggle to get it prioritized.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Marnie. So even when government is doing a national level survey, so it's wash and menstrual hygiene. So unless and until menstrual hygiene is a component, so it's water sanitation and menstrual hygiene should be a core component. But now if they are doing it separately, so menstrual hygiene management is considered a separate component, if we bring into the broader WASH, we can't report, say, a WASH situation without menstrual hygiene management. So this is a core component. Once we are at this point, I think things will change.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, in Bolivia, menstrual hygiene management is not too big high focus on in their country. So that even if I'm working in the sexual reproductive health area, but we are more focused on the sexuality education, but not more percentage of providing the menstruation education to the people. So we need to figure out how to improve the menstruation education for girls and women, even if they don't know exactly how to calculate the menstrual cycle. So that we need to provide the basic education for them. And actually, I really want to recommend to have a conducting some research if you have a chance to come to in Bolivia about the indigenous women and girls, because there are 36 indigenous groups. So it would be better to figure out how to improve each groups. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all for your participation, to the speakers for the brilliant presentation. I'll tell you, in my case, when I first came here, I was scared mostly because I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she's about to start. Yeah, so and I learn a lot. And that's, I want to thank you all for all the things that I learned here today. Okay, so thank you very much and see you. Careful here, there's a trap here.
I stepped over it many times.
Yeah. So gotta go to the postal location. Around. So thank you, nice to meet you. Thank you, nice to meet you.
What you have, it doesn't really. I think knowledge is super important.
Didn't have somebody applaud it. But I gotta get slowly.
Right.
The rest from there. Yeah. Need some things.
Right, we did look at it.
Especially if they.
Yes.
We do, we don't. We like.
Yeah.
There was a, we brought it, we brought it.
One explanation. So we cut it on the plate with the like. Bring out the thing. Just depending on.
Yeah, and we would miss a box.
Yeah, and I wish the show was being. We ended up being like. Team scale.
Yes, I know. We've actually. There's still the original version. Not any. No one's getting, no, but that was the pressure, like, I see never read out of the one, I was going to. So it was like, that was like, you were technically sold out, we're getting some items, I'm like, oh, what could you really?
So we think that a registry, an interventions registry,
I look.
is not just the data,
Yeah.
it's actually.
That's really interesting. I was like that. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, what you want? Oh, awesome. In that session. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, just want to collect the truth and numbers. I like trying to understand. So yeah, I was like, I think I'll be like, remember back in the. Yeah, so I did to get like, so I guess I took time to get feedback from it's like this. And share out with all the other guys you want to. What is the short form Sunday? That is definitely has been my biggest pain in practicing the presentation is like how do you synthesize what factor analysis is. Yeah. Yeah. So you should. Yeah, I had done I shared my initial slides with Becky and Sheila and they were like, take out all that stuff about thresholds. They don't care. But you'll know, you'll be there, you'll know. But
Yeah, we're gonna actually try and